So I was asked to come to Maura Park to look for special places, interesting sites people would want to explore, people might want to find, as a way to engage the community with the landscape at a deeper level. Maura Park is special because the diversity of landscape types, so these old pastures with oak trees in particular, then to have these ponds scattered among Lake Pewee, and the 40 acres of forest, all captured in this one park, is really exceptional. There are now more people living in urban areas in the world than there are in rural areas for the first time in history. I think we really need places like Maura Park so that kids can do that, right? So they can get out and explore, get off of the screen and the computer, and really be outside, finding their inner Daniel Boone or whatever it is. If we want to have wilderness areas, anywhere in the world, from the Amazon to the Arctic or anywhere in between, in this new urban century that we're entering, we have to have urban parks, right? Because if anyone's going to care about those far-flung places in the world, they need to experience the natural world in their own home. Because most people aren't going to go to the Amazon, and most people aren't going to go to the Arctic. But those places are important, and the only direct connection they're going to get is by getting outside in their home community. Going forward, I think, thinking about how should we manage this park, how should we manage this landscape, the overarching concept that I see is to just being thoughtful and being intentional. These trees that are much older than we are, and will outlive everyone alive today, they're a finite resource. They're a gem, and stewarding those trees, I think, is really, really important going forward. Because thinking about the visitors to Maura Park in 2114, 100 years from now, what's their experience going to be? And the decisions being made now are going to affect those people. The three conservation concerns that I think about are, first, exotic species. So invasive species, these are plants mostly, but other animals or pathogens that come from Europe or Asia or somewhere, and they get into North America through a variety of means, and our ecosystems have no immunity to these species. They are quite literally like a cancer on the landscape. They grow and expand with no real ecosystem contribution. And so, and here in Maura Park, we see that Japanese honeysuckle is particularly bad in the forest. And so that's going to need some attention. The second thing that I would be concerned about are predators and carnivores. If we were to stand here 200 or so years ago, we would have lots of black bear, cougars, wolves, bobcats, all these things, and we don't have those today. And so our deer population has exploded, and that has great consequences, not only to the forest and its ability, or in this case inability, to regenerate, but also right down to ticks and tick-borne illnesses are increased when you have too many deer. So figuring that out. And then, of course, the third one is climate change. And that one is very difficult to get our heads around, how it functions. And climate has been changing throughout time. That's what the planet does. But we're going to watch it change very rapidly in our lifetimes. And it'll happen here in Maura Park. It's going to change, and this environment is going to change with it. I'd like to see in Maura Park, places where people can find quiet, right? Where they can take a walk, get their mind and their soul moving in a way that is a little harder to do, maybe at home or just in an urban area, or and just opening this up to exploration. So I'd like to see a good system of foot trails for people to walk, that ideally don't interface too much with the road and the parking lots and the kind of the necessary infrastructure that parks have to have. Yeah, and places for quiet. A good trail system in the forest. Places for people to sit by these ponds, because those are people love water. So yeah, that's what I would like to see. Yeah, I would not like to see in Maura Park those things that are often built into parks that only serve the 10%, right? And so baseball fields is one of those. I love baseball; it's a great game, but those baseball fields, they're expensive to build at first, and then for 90% of their existence, they sit there unused, and no one else can use that space in the meantime. And so, walking is the most popular recreational activity in the country today. And it was the most popular recreational activity 100 or 200 years ago. And so how can we facilitate that and encourage that? And so, yeah, so a park that serves the 90% rather than the 10, and a light footprint on the infrastructure. Not too many parking lots, just the right amount. You want to accommodate everyone, but being careful not to overbuild. One of the interesting sites I found in the forest, it's not even so much a site, it's one individual feature. And so for many of our eastern trees, oaks and hickories and these things, when they're cut, when they're harvested, oftentimes they'll resprout from the stump. So the tree gets cut, and then within a year or so, little shoots are coming up off the stump. And so we call that coppicing. And one of the trees I found in the forest was a tree that had been cut some time ago, and then it was recently cut. After the ice storm of 2009, they went in there to kind of clean up some of that. And this tree had 2 trunks, and one of them was cut off. And so it gave me this great opportunity to be able to count the tree rings, right? We're going back to elementary school science, where each ring is 1 year of growth. And this particular tree had 180 rings on that regrowth. So that means in the year, it was right around 1835, someone was out in that forest and they cut that tree down and the tree resprouted. That's the earliest evidence of land use that I found on the property, is 1835. There's another site, a second site that I found in the northeast corner of the park, where there are many, it's an open pasture, lots of oaks, and most of them are coppiced. They have 2 or 3 trunks. And in that particular site, there were 2 cuttings, one in 1890 and the second cutting in 1930. And so now, and then it's been a wooded pasture ever since. And so there's really a just outstanding storybook of engagement between people and landscape that's embedded into this landscape here, and it's really, really outstanding. A forest has, like our community, our built environment, has a remarkable ability to heal itself. It's very resilient, and so an ice storm in the context of a forest is not that big a deal. The trees that survive carry on, they heal their damage, and the forest carries on. And so in this year, in 2014, they went in, people who managed the property had some trees cut out that were damaged by that ice storm, which is just fine. And they did a nice job in there. But the concern now is that the exotic species that are in there. There's some multiflora rose, there's Japanese honeysuckle. These things, now that there's been light opened up into the canopy of the forest, these things are going to proliferate. And this has the potential to be a very big job, because plants, unlike some other problems that parks face, plants reproduce. And this problem is only going to get worse. So the sooner that people managing the property can deal with that, with those invasive plants, the better off it's going to be, the cheaper it's going to be, and the better the forest is going to be ultimately in the end. And that's what we want, right? We want a healthy forest with diverse array of native plants and animals, and that forest has great potential for that. So I think it's really important to honor Kentucky's natural history by really encouraging and being thoughtful about bringing in native plants, both in, from all plants, from the prairies and the grasses to the wildflowers and also the trees. So any tree plantings that are done, let's not bring in the Bradford pear, which is, every landscape architect and park loves to use the Bradford pear because it has these beautiful flowers. We have other native trees that have beautiful flowers. We have cherries. We have serviceberry. We have dogwoods. We don't need Bradford pear. So and that's really honoring Kentucky's natural history, which is both fascinating from a sort of intellectual level, but also just stunningly beautiful. No matter where you go in the state, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. One thing I'd like to see happen in Maura Park, even if just on a small scale, is a little bit of reforestation, right? Because 200 years ago, this would have been nearly entirely forested, if not entirely forested. And now the property is maybe 4/5 open or largely open. And so a little bit of reforestation, in the northwest corner around Lake Pewee, where the soils are a little bit wetter, and getting some plants, getting the community involved in planting trees, getting out there, getting dirty for a weekend, and planting, a few thousand trees would just be remarkable. To be able to go back as a grandparent and tell your grandkid, I planted this tree when I was your age, would just be a wonderful thing for the people in this community. To do a reforestation, you'd really want to have a diverse array of native trees. A lot of the trees that are already here would be good. Sweet gum, the white oaks and the red oaks. You could add some pin oak, which I've only found 2 of, so they're fairly underrepresented. There could be more. Some red maple. And a tree that may have been here up to 100 years ago is the American chestnut. The soils here are right for the American chestnut, and the American chestnut tree was extirpated largely from the eastern forest beginning in 1913, when a blight, another exotic species, came in and killed the entire species off. Now there are chestnut trees that are fairly resistant to the blight, and so putting together a chestnut orchard of resistant trees could be just a wonderful, wonderful thing to add to this park. Well, a couple things I'm going to take with me leaving here after just 3 days walking this land are a few images in my mind that I'll probably hold on to for a very long time, and that is just walking back to the Maura house, to the Maura residence, in the evening light, here in late October with the colors all changed and beautiful, and just, the quality of the light in walking through this old pasture landscape with these big old trees is something that, aside from the project that I'm doing and all that, is something that'll stay with me forever. So there's no shortage of inspiration on this landscape, from dawn to dusk, even at night. And I imagine at night here in July, listening to the cicadas would just be deafening to some degree in a good way. To have a week or two to spend intimately with this landscape and pull, to pull from that and express in whatever artistic medium one has or one deals with. What a treat, what a joy to be able to do that. Right? So I would love to be here during spring when the bird song is rich, and the frogs in the ponds are rich, and and hone in onto the more kind of seasonable aspect. And so every day there's a sunrise, every day there's a sunset, every year there's a spring, every year there's a winter. And these are very much, sunrise and spring and sunset and winter are very similar phenomenons. At dawn, life returns, and in spring, life returns. And similarly, at night, life quiets down, just like in November and December, life quiets down. And so these seasonal cycles are having a place to experience that seasonal cycle. And to come to Maura Park once a week or twice a week for a whole year and sit in the same spot and watch the light move from the same spot day after day would just be, I can't imagine anything better to do with one's time.